I want to make a follow-up piece to the education video I made, and in particular the part about creating specialized zones in which voucher schools can exist near townships and informal settlements or within those areas, just depending on particular circumstances. And I want to say that we should extend that specialized zone framework to business. I think one of the issues in this country is that small and medium-sized businesses are constricted and overtaxed, and people are having a hard time floating. And I think one of the things we can do within those specialized zones is create a space in which businesses who move there pay much lower taxes. I think it would be a way to incentivize businesses to move back to those areas. Um, because I think we have to take a multi-pronged approach to improving communities and neighborhoods. And this is especially true of Cape Town, because we're backed up against the mountain and the sea. Not everybody can move to social housing closer to the CBD. There's always going to be people on the periphery of the city. It just is what it is. We can talk in another video about Cape Town's refusal to densify um, the inner city, to really densify the inner city and make it something viable and something, um, I don't know what's the word. I'll get back to that anyway. But back to the point. I think that multi-pronged approach would really help us, because one of the things about building communities is good schools, good businesses, employment for people in that area. And then we can start to figure out things like housing and sanitation as well, which we can do in another video. In my view, in modern society, there are four things for building the essential dignity of people, and that is education, employment, healthcare, and then you can put housing and put sanitation in brackets, because I think those are the building blocks to living a dignified life. Creating specialized zones for both schools and businesses is a start. We can always bring in housing policy to that, and policy to build sanitation infrastructure into that. But first, we have to get the things associated with the market right, and with the things that build people's skills and education up. Because ultimately, people have to have the ability and the earning potential in which to secure things for themselves, services and goods, because we are a market economy. And I think relying simply on government to do that is a mistake. I think we have to find creative solutions in which government sets good frameworks for which the market can flourish. Um, I think this would, in effect, help us deal with the issue we have, in which a lot of people are chronically unemployed. A lot of people will sit on welfare, and I'm not trying to denigrate people on welfare, because I understand that when you're desperate, that sort of money can be life-saving from welfare. Let's not get it twisted and denigrate people who are struggling in life. But that's just a symptom. The bigger issue is, how do we help people in society, the so-called bottom 50%, secure a better means and outcomes for themselves in terms of securing goods and services for themselves. Because the real issue in this country, and many people have said it, is not poverty but inequality. I want to further that and say the most devastating thing is not poverty. Humanity has been poor for like 90% of our time on earth. Chronically poor, desperately poor. People dying at 30, people dying of their teeth, of crazy things. It's only in the last sort of 200 years of capitalism when society has grown quite rapidly. And I think the issue is that in poverty you don't have the choices that other people have. That is the really soul destroying thing about poverty. It's not necessarily just the poverty. The most devastating thing is that sort of psychosocial thing in which you feel powerless, in which you don't feel a sense of agency because other people have choices that you do not, and that you are confronted by that every single day. So, in us solving the problems in this country, we've got to think in that way. And in my personal view, we've got to think in such a way in which we say, how do we set the frameworks and the systems in which poor people and working class people can secure similar or the same choices as middle class people? Because I think the over focus on the rich is a mistake. Rich people are very few and far between in South Africa and the planet just by itself. Depending on what you read, there's probably only about 18 million millionaires in the world. That's a very small segment of the population, and an even smaller segment who are very, very super rich. I think something along 200,000 or 300,000 people who are considered ultra wealthy. That's $30 million or more in net worth. So we mustn't make the mistake of overly focusing on rich people. I think that's why when you go to any strong economy that in which people are happy, in which there isn't a lot of inequality, you find very large middle classes, a thriving middle class. And I think that's the issue we have. The difference, I think, fundamentally between the middle class and the poor is choices. So that's why I think advocating for choices like school choice, bringing more businesses towards areas in townships and informal settlements in which people have a choice of jobs, plugging in the gaps in which people can be ready as a workforce to take those jobs. Yes, of course, we have to talk about an integrated public transport system, but that's for another video. In this particular video, I think we can eliminate so much, or we can do the work of eliminating so much of the issue around people who have to wake up at 4 in the morning, 4:30. It's dark, it's cold, especially in winter in Cape Town, and they have to travel 2 hours, take trains and taxis just to get to menial work in the inner city or the suburbs. And you often have employers who don't care, who don't understand that struggle, who are I don't know, calloused to that kind of life, the kind of hard knocks life. And I think one of the things we can do is definitely develop areas towards the periphery, creating real economies in townships. As I floated this idea to a friend who's a small business owner, the biggest concern was security. And I think part of that, and the corollary of putting in specialized zones, is that there has to be a wholesale professionalization of the police. We have to have good and visible policing. We have to have situations in which business owners feel safe and feel like they can locate their businesses within areas without having disruption, especially from gangs here in the Western Cape. I think that is the big issue. We already have the anti-gang unit, which is doing exceptional work, but we need to double down on that so that poor communities within Cape Town can have greater access and choice. Yeah.